Okay, greetings everyone, and welcome to October 12th, finally, the Indigenous People Day. Uh, I'm not going to say my other part because it might not be worth. But anyway, yes, we're going to do ancestors today with Kate and I, and talk about the ancestors, and because usually in most cultures that was the first religion was the ancestors, and not when somebody passed on, you felt their spirit was still there. So, Kate, yes.
It's a big subject. And in October, so
Yes,
perfect time for this as well.
yes. Well, we're coming up Halloween and that kind of thing, the Day of the Dead. It's a whole
Yeah.
nother subject that I learned recently about that as well. So, where did we start?
Well, when I would think about ancestors, well, right now. So I hear a lot about people looking to heal ancestral wounding. And what does that even mean? And hearing about, can I really adopt the same patterns and things that, my goers went through? I mean, can there really be patterns like that run through families? And I would be so interested in hearing more about what you would have to say about that, because that's a big
Well,
topic
yes,
right now.
it's a big topic. Yeah. Well, there's two different levels of it because you're looking first of all your physical ancestry, your biological ancestry, right? So, and we know that from let's see, ancestry.com, right? That's a big thing now. I did have mine. But those are the physical ancestors, right? So that's that one. So then there's I want to say, the metaphysical, or we say spiritual ancestry that's non-physical. And that also, if you want to look at that, one wants to look at that, if we are to understand that we are beings from other worlds, from other planets, from other stars, that will also be part of, quote, the ancestry. So the ancestors would be the first thing that would happen, that I would imagine, and it used to be in African cultures and also other cultures, that okay, somebody dies and then a child is born. They go, well, that's Uncle Remus. Come back and tell he has a certain quirks about him and that little child that's in the family. And because there were more, I want to say, collective families, more embodied family, people, families, members, and everybody. So the ancestors become that. Now, how there's a belief now that the ancestors, you can interact with them. Okay, and so that's now. Recently, I've been working on the healing of the ancestors from my generations of slaves and before in Africa to present time. So that's a very daunting task I found. As I was in a meditation recently, and sometimes one of the meditations, the person that was doing the healing said, "Well, your ancestors, they feel disempowered, so we empower the ancestors." So those are the types of things that can be there. Now, the other thing I was going to mention, and this is just with Halloween, just as a side note, the Day of the Dead, we're pretty much in the Western Hemisphere with the Aztecs, the Mayans. They all kind of had a similar celebration in that the person who had died within that year's time, they would bring in their favorite foods, their clothes, they set a place at the table for them to honor the ancestors who had passed on. Now, this got taken over to Halloween and the boogeyman's and the ghost and all that kind of stuff. Um, and the whole thing with witchcraft was a celebration of that day of reverse 1331. A lot of stuff in that. But on the spiritual levels, the ancestors are the teachers and healers who are on this other side, and they are probably the first line of worship that you can have, that one may have, that you move from the physical plane of existence to another plane of existence. And if you look at our lives, we just pass through here. Yeah, sometimes it always amazes me when someone who has died, and you go to their funeral or go to their house, that person isn't there anymore. They're gone. Their clothes are there, everything, but they are gone. And where did they go? And so that would be the question that the ancestors probably ask. Where did they go? Um, so anyway, you can jump in anytime. Stop the ancestors. What did you think?
Well, no, and I mean, I think that that is absolutely, the ancestral piece is, I think, a big piece of our experience that oftentimes doesn't go noticed unless we are raised in an environment where it's respected and honored
Right.
and discussed. And that can look very, very different in different cultures, but also just from home to home in any given community and neighborhood, any town, anywhere you
Right.
look. And so I have been spending a lot of time as well just working on this self exploration and healing piece within, talking to ancestors, and what does that uncover and what does that provide as far as more insight as to our own experiences, and then of course, what's going on before us and what's in us as far as our DNA. And you mentioned the work that you're doing with your ancestors, and how complex and dynamic that is. And on the flip side, there's every equation of trauma. I mean, when we talk about that, there's not a single one of us that hasn't either been the master, been the slave, that hasn't been on one point of extreme or another in absolute trauma and crisis, and things that I don't think I would wish upon anyone as an experience. How does that affect us? You know, how does it affect us? And at what point is it really right that we know it's time to start working with our ancestors as well?
Yes, that's a good question because one of the things that happens, and this is on the biological level, um, when you experience or someone in the family experiences great pain, a great trauma, or shame, or something, then that is also passed on through the DNA. So that's the physical level. The DNA is very, physical. It also probably has non-physical qualities as well, but let's stay with the physical because we want to, pass out there, of shame, or someone who was raped or abused, that gets passed on in through the genes, right? And so a lot of this also is that as we are in awareness, and people who are become aware and are aware, we can then help the ancestors, and they can help us. So this is this balance here. Um, I would say, say my grandmother, yeah, and this usually starts with somebody that you know within your family. My grandmother was a healer, so she was a laying of hands healer. And so oftentimes I didn't, she would take me to churches and in North Carolina, and then after the churches, after the church ceremony, she would do her healing with olive oil and prayer and so forth. What I could see was light coming out of her hands. Now, this ancestral gift probably was passed on through the gene pool from Africa or somewhere even before that. That's the lineage. But at the same time, how it manifested me was I was doing massage, and when I was doing massage, I was massaging the final massage. You get to massage your teacher. She's saying your hands are getting hot. What are you doing? Well, this massage is just learning to roll your hands and fingers and so forth. So, wow, that's so good. And you're going, hmm. So that in that dream that night, my grandmother comes to me, these gifts have been passed on. How you manifest that, how I've manifested that, it may be different from her manifestation. She was also what they call a prayer warrior. People would call up and say, Miss Maudie, her name was Maudie, would you pray for me? She'd go into a prayer, and people, feel like they got changed and healed. So these types of gifts, or were there musical gifts passed on? I'm thinking just flashed in my mind from Ozzy and Harriet. I think Ozzy, actual, that's way before your time, Kate. Way before time. But,
I know.
one of I think the great grandfather was not what's it called, the right time was a musician, and now Lil Ricky became a musician, right, from that. We're saying, wow, that's so all these things passed on. And so then how does one honor the ancestors, respect? So I think more so now, especially now, there's a need to respect the elders. I think that's where it starts, and recognizing, and then
And
taking
when we
care.
talk about elders,
Hmm?
what are we talking about?
We're talking about elders,
Yeah.
ancestors. Well, elders in your family.
Here now. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, the ones here right now. So, and then the ancestors, they passed on wisdom and they passed on the energy. I recently, again, I was in the healing, and one of my ancestors was feeling disempowered, and my healer had me to empower the ancestor so that I could feel empowered. But let's say, we're looking at indigenous people. Well, geez, I mean, what happened to the natives that were here? Being brutalized and raped, and put in orphanages, and the land stolen, and that has a traumatic effect on it. How do you heal that? And there are ways, and now, especially now, that we are coming into awareness that we can allow there to be healing of the ancestors, and also allow the ancestors to come through to you. Okay, so what is it? Oh, yeah, one of the more interesting, let's say, readings was given for someone who asked me to give readings for her brothers and sisters because their father had passed on. It was some months after that passing on. And sure enough, these people were out of town. I had no idea what I was saying. But a couple of years later, when one of the sisters, or the woman who asked me to answer, said they were at a bar mitzvah, she came up to me. She was crying. So she gave me a message from my father. I go, wow, I don't. Well, the day of the funeral, I was doing. We were all expected to do something, uh, participate in the father and your father's funeral, and I decided to play some jazz because he loved New Orleans jazz, and I know that Louis Armstrong and that marching back from the second line. They call it second line back from the burial. So she's playing that, and she said the message you gave me from my father was thanks for the music. He said that changed my life. I became better. I was, I decided to go back to school, but do all these things, and I really appreciate that message. So that's a voice of the ancestors coming back through. So we don't know how to do that other than to honor those people that are in our lives presently. And I love this ceremony with the Day of the Dead. I think that's a cool idea. I don't know if that's going to be, become more rather than Halloween and mask and candy and all this other stuff that we like ghosts and goblins and all that kind of stuff. Because that's the tendency, is to look at this as ghosts and goblins.
Ghoulify
it. Yes, rather than, okay, so these are teachers and healers and friends, and then also that gives the idea that life or existence is eternal. It goes on and on and on. We don't necessarily know that.
Joseph, I was thinking, you're talking about hearing ancestors and working with our ancestors. And I think it's so important that, everyone remembers that, we don't have to be mediums to work with our ancestors. They are our birthright, right? I mean, you don't have to have mediumship. You don't have to have any clairvoyance or clairaudience or anything. It is there. It'll all come through, right?
Right, it all comes through. And if you're, open to the idea of listening.
Yeah.
Because out here in our world, we have so much noise now. It's like amazing. But listening to your own inner guidance and spirits, and it could be the voices of the ancestors. And why not have that be part of your spiritual nature? It's part of your spiritual routine. I'm tuning in. I'm sitting, meditating. I wanted my grandmother to come through and talk to me or sit with her. So yeah, there are many different ways we can interact with ancestors, and it can be very beneficial to our transformational process.
And what would you say as far as, when you're working with your ancestors or you're first making contact, who do you go towards? I've heard and I am aware of, just like regular people, right? Where there's a wide variation of
Right.
those in our tribe, in our ancestral tribe. So where do we start? Where would you say?
Well, or start with the love. There's some particular ancestor that you feel that you felt very close to, very loving, and it could be a mother and father. Some people feel very close to their mother and father when they pass on. And to be with them and to sit with them and to sit with that energy, sit with the intention of getting guidance and having answers. It's not necessarily somebody to show up and knock on you, hey, could could be that way. I don't know. But that's the intention of doing something positive, doing something uplifting. I need some help. I need answers, and especially if there's one. Again, most of the time it starts with the one that you felt closest to, where they were alive or something. A lot of times I get the grandmothers and the grandfathers who are the ancestors. That's the starting point. It can be very, very beneficial. Now, is this psychologically sound? If they're telling you to do something that sounds pretty weird, go ahead and kill that person. I don't know. I don't know if that's ancestors or that's true.
No, I would say that. And it might be an ancestor, but it's not the one you're working with.
Yeah, I need to get some revenge, okay? On my death. No. But it can be. It isn't required. It just can be a very great source of love and healing and personal transformation work. So especially if you are involved in a transformational process of healing, of becoming better. Something that makes you better. This works for you, then great.
Yeah,
Now on the other
you can't make this stuff up.
No, you can't.
Something that you're like, I really need to check that box off for ancestral healing.
Yeah. Well, and then the other side of this, where you and I involved in the, I want to say, quote, metaphysical, or the idea that you have on a non-physical level beings that you can interact with on a non-physical level that can be very positive for you. Now, the system that we learned, and I think was that you have a male and female counselor. And that was kind of an ancient system, because usually they said that they were counselors. And I've had people telling me when they were children, they could see their guardian angels or the ancestors. Somebody was always with them. So these words coming, an imaginary friend, right?
Oh yeah.
Somebody once said, I heard this, that God is an imaginary friend for adults. I don't know if we can do that way, but that medium can be very powerful. And if you're aware of your other lifetimes, if that's something that you explore, see, because you can do that as well with another lifetime, of your own little lifetime, that you're aware of. But one can be aware of where you're going, you meet that person that you knew about, that where you can be in that meditative state and go, okay, I'll take from you your gifts, but I won't take the trauma of that, or I need that sensing. And many lifetimes of having counselors, male and female, in a higher self. We talked about that, and your soul. And so these are, again, the unseen friends. So that's we can technically ancestors, but they are also aspects of ourselves. We're constantly one can, if one chooses, to go to that path, right? Mm-hmm. Now, there are deities that we tend to worship, Buddha, Muhammad, and that kind of stuff. Tendency is to go see them as ancestors. Because you think about it, the religions that we have today, Christ is the Savior, or how one views that. There are millions of people praying to those people every day, to the ancestor of Christ, to the ancestor of Muhammad or Buddha, and for guidance, for help. And that can be considered ancestor. I don't know. I mean, sounds a bit stretched, but deity worship is where our religions are. We worship deities and ask for their help and assistance on our physical level. I don't know.
Well, and I know people, their loved ones who have passed assistant, please watch over this event, or please watch over, this situation, or whatever the case might be. And so, I think it's natural, you say praying to Muhammad or Buddha or Jesus about, and thinking of that as a family and truly in one's blood. I mean, absolutely. It all kind of fits under that same piece where we go to that which makes us feel familiar, and that is our ancestral, piece.
Yeah, the ancestral past. And we there's around here, especially here in New Mexico, what I've noticed a lot is the graveyards everywhere. There's just like a little bit of graveyard, here and there, and people, and we don't, unbury them. They're very, and people come back. I used to work for Inglewood Park Cemetery. Yes, right, Inglewood Park Cemetery. And on those holidays like Memorial Day or some other Christmas Day or something, there were people who would come to the cemetery, because the Inglewood Park Cemetery is massive, have picnic lunches and talk. And there were people who, this is what they did. This was part of their life, to be able to be close to that energy of those who have passed on before them. So yeah, it's a fabulous world. It is a fabulous way to connect and to recognize, all right, there is more to this than just this physical level. Everybody pretends to know. I don't think I know it all. I'm not going to pretend. Do you die and go to heaven, or you die and go to hell? Okay, well, hope there's heaven, but then that's a state of land of milk and honey. It's kind of a bad diet, but hey, it's a nice one. Or in a sense, you can become an angel. Maybe you want to become an angel, become a guide to others on the world. I mean, there's a lot of good, healthy things. It's not unhealthy. Now, sure, obsessions can be unhealthy. Sure, you can do anything that can become unhealthy. But a balance, and to recognize that they're loved, and there could be loving beings with you all the time. Why not?
Well, I certainly experienced it to be my reality. So they help.
Yeah, I mean, I stumbled upon one day, what was it, Nashville's Ghost Club, right? It was a club in Nashville, Tennessee. He was telling stories about ghosts and everything. But what was very interesting was a woman who had a teenage cousin who had died traumatically in a car accident. And so she had been told by some psychic that this cousin watches over her and watches over her other cousin, his sister. And so she had the experience. She was sharing with us that she was in a car. She had a son in the child seat in the back, and she all of a sudden she hears her say, "Stop!" And when she stopped, there's this big truck that ran the stop sign, and so she was saved in that moment. But her son says, "Mommy, who's the man in the car with us?" So he heard the voice. So are these things that can be proven? Well, no, not really, but
she's alive.
Yeah, she's alive. So she goes, yeah, I listened because I put the brakes on. So, are there things watching out for us? Yes, perhaps not. I don't know. What if that works for you? If you feel the calling for that, if you feel that you want to get in touch with that, then that can be wonderful. One of the last stories is another kind of a different type of story, but a wonderful woman came to me when I was living in Los Angeles. She was beautiful. But she was in tears. She had a lot of crying. And what had happened was her husband had died, and she was in her early 30s, and this was the love of her life. And they bought a new house out there in Pennsylvania. They were planning for children. He calls up, says, "Honey, I'm on the way up. Dinner's almost ready." He said, "Good, I'll be there." He never made it home, and he died in a car accident, tragedy. And she was in a lot of pain. And this was, she had done this for like 2 years. So when she comes to me, I remember sitting her in a meditation and bringing her husband in. They were sitting by the dock of a bay and staring into the water. And I cannot tell you what happened because I don't remember. I wasn't part of the healing. I don't think I was pulled out, but she left. She was feeling good. And then the next day she calls me. She says, I finally got rid of all his clothes and things because he told me to have to let him go because he was not going to come back and that he was sorry he had to go. I mean, she, did, but I got rid of all those things. I've been holding on to all that for years and years and years. So in that sense, that's, working with those energies. Is that an ancestor? Well, that's a loved one. But she got healed, and the healing came because he told her to let him go. He was not coming back. He was never going to come home. And as hurtful as that was, she had to accept it and get on with her life. Now, I don't know what happened to her, but she called me the next day to let me know, yeah, that really worked. I really appreciate that because I finally let go. So sometimes we hold on, but in these moment of ancestral worship and not worship, but ancestral, that we're recognizing that there's something more to this life that we've been given, and they can be a tremendous part of our own healing.
Mm-hmm. And so many of us do feel lack thereof around a whole lot of our stories or our relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And these can be with our, biological family that are alive, and those
Mm-hmm.
who have gone before us. And it is true that if we try to engage, if we choose to engage that, there is a tremendous amount of, insight available to us. And that for the most part, at least with those ancestors who are ready to work on their healing,
Yes.
it's a really twofold beautiful process that really reverberates throughout the entire family. And with that, I would love, can we talk a little bit about what happens, when we have filled a new piece of understanding about a relationship or what's going on in our family or had that spiritual experience, knowing more about our soul or about our soul tribe or whatever might have gone. How does that affect our life? How does that affect our real, very three-dimensional earthly goings about with our family and our friends? How can that affect us?
Well, I think it affects us because we are trying to get towards, trying to create more love in our lives, trying to create more balance. And, even on because we're dealing with, in the families, that can be upsetting things to go on. And so the idea is always try to find the healing, try to go for the healing. Uh, Fabulous things can result from that. And once you can get to that place where you can allow interaction either with shamans or people that let's try to work these things out so it's not always this fight, because that's the tendency to want to fight. We can get loud and louder and louder and louder and hit and scream and all these other things that go on, but the tendency is just to find that love, also to recognize sometimes that they can help with hurt and the pain and to sit and to recognize a couple of things come to mind. One of the things that one of my again, used to sell cemetery property, and woman had her mother cremated, and she, there are so many laws to deal with ashes, dead bodies. You don't want to get into that, but she buried her mother's ashes on the ground and put a rose bush on top. So now she said, "Dad, when I go out there, that's my mother. She's got these beautiful roses, you know." So you can have those wonderful kind of connections if you so want. And a lot of the grieving and crying is for you, not for them. The grieving and crying is for your miss, for your pain, and for your loss. You know, that happens. But then, you know, people, death is the ultimate healer. You know, you're done. You move through this earth plane. You come somewhere else, and everybody there. I know people right now telling me I know exactly what happens when you die. I don't. Okay, so I'm not going to pretend like I do. I have no idea. But every now and then, you sense of immortality and the sense of eternity, the sense of immortality, and that there is something more, that this fabulous life that we offer is what. And then the other side of this, having a body is a great thing, right? It slows down time. Could be. Yeah, it could be having a nice body is a nice flowing energy and healing. Or the last thing, when I remember, I had a daughter who passed away, and she was very a traumatic fashion, and it was very painful for me to go through that. And a couple of years later, a psychic came to me. She said, "Oh, I see this little girl. She's around you all the time. She puts a hand on your face and tells you that she loves you." And oh my God, I lost it again. But she said the lesson she came to teach you was she loved you unconditionally. So you need to learn to love yourself the same way, without conditions, without judgment.
Mhm.
It's like a fabulous lesson, thinking about that. And again, is that ancestor? I like to think so.
I think so.
Yeah, definitely so. So there we go. So is there, so the
Well, this is, I mean, truly, this is an incredible time, and I think people are hearing more, even if they're just thinking of their loved ones who are no longer physically with us. They're thinking
Mhm.
about them more right around now, and and that is the way. And I know we like to say, "Oh, it's the holidays." It's just you miss them the most around the holidays, and I don't even necessarily know, is it that so much as the fact that I want to say that it's almost like you can feel them more near, those people that really do potentially watch over us or whatever the case might be. They're on our minds a little bit more now. And almost
Mm.
like that they can feel a little bit closer. And this is truly if you're interested in engaging right now and really kind of starting to explore your relationship on any of these ancestral, areas of exploration, this is an incredible time to do it. I mean, truly.
Yeah, yeah, sure. And also, you got to look at what we're into, the pandemic and the deaths that come from that. The people who are dying, trying to teach her something, leaving lifestyle. Sometimes there are distance from us, right? You don't know this. Sometimes there are people who are close to you, and so that they're passed on, and the tragedy and the pain in their families that need to be healed. So that's also at this particular time, at this particular year, 2020, that also could be part of what you're feeling. That hey. Um, but I don't go to the graveyards on Halloween. Okay, I'm just not gonna do that. I'm not ready to hang out at night and invite us. And there are other things that happen. You necessarily want to talk about those things, but they are there too. So you're not gonna pretend like it's all love and light, right? Okay.
Yeah, we know better than that. We know better than that. And this is also not the time to screw around with any of that.
Let me see if I can conjure some spirits up. No, I'm not. That's not really been my thing.
No.
Never want to, this, conjuring and all that kind of stuff. I don't know.
But there's some great work that can be done. And it's incredible I know when we talk to people and hear about all the different ways that they do work with their ancestors. I mean, you shared some of your stories, and it's incredible the way that they pop through to us, whether it's just a simple memory at just a very uncanny time, or the song,
Mhm.
Or I know a lot of people use certain type of birds or animals as totems for, you know, their loved ones who've gone before. Really cool
Right.
stuff there. And I love to hear all the different ways that people recognize it.
There's connection. That's trying to connect, and so that connection is so vitally important to us. Connect in a love. I could always say, if you can connect in a loving way, with that. And if there's somebody who died that you don't really like, you don't need to be in touch with them because that doesn't necessarily work for you. It's no use feeling guilty or ashamed that, well, I should have loved them. Well, that's stuff that happened in life for you was real enough to make you not want to be with that person or be around that person so much. So don't do that. Don't do that to yourself. Don't make yourself feel judged and guilty. I have to love everyone. I have to forgive everyone. I have to, well, yeah, that's great, but do what you can, do the best you can to be. And so still we're trying to get to, as we talked about in the beginning, the idea here, it's always, even with ancestral things, even with higher self, with soul, with spirit, to make yourself a better person so that you can create more love in the world. And our world needs more love because I think it will have an impact upon where we're headed.
That's so right.
Uh,
It is. Well, this has been a great talk on just ancestors. And I know that there's so much subject to cover here, and I'm sure that we will
Right.
round back on some point. But again, this
Yes.
this has been on a lot of people's hearts and minds lately. We've had a lot more time, as you've mentioned. So
Not more time sitting around. Hey, what we're doing?
yeah. So
Okay.
would you like to go ahead and share with everybody, and just in closing, where they can find more out about Joseph's
Oh
meditation
yes.
healing?
Well, we first our website is www.josephmeditations.com. The Light Within, right?
Yes, you can find my practice website at thelightwithin.life.
And yeah, and then ask questions. Definitely love to have feedback from you if that's what you want to do. Okay, you guys are crazy, or it was really nice because it brings up certain things. Because again, in that warm, fuzzy feeling, sometimes you do want to feel warm and fuzzy, and loving and caring and kind, and have fabulous stories of your ancestors and talk about them, especially around what seems to be Halloween. And to think about that particular ceremony that I said before, of having the ancestors and bringing out their favorite things and favorite toys and favorite things that they have, and to be that, because what you do is you make peace with death.
Mm. And that's that love that you're talking about.
Make
That's part
peace
of
with
it.
death.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all, no one gets out of this one alive. Someone told me. Yeah, yeah, okay. So you begin to make peace with that, and to have also a sense of your own immortality. All right.
And they can
So
show us, right? They can
yeah, they can
really.
show us stuff. Yes, they can show us stuff, and they can be funny too. The last story. One of my great friends who passed on, and he was the life of the party. He'd crack up, he'd call me up, he had some crazy joke to tell me and just laugh. And his lover at the time, when he passed away, was very hurt, and so I went to see his lover a couple of years after that, and wondered what was happening to him because I hadn't seen him in a while. And his lover said, "Yeah, but I've moved, and I moved to a new place." I go, "What?" And whenever he had this, the sunken living room floor and the high ceiling, I said, "What the heck?" He said, "Well, I got this job, and I've been making a lot of money, and I got friends, and there's old younger couple that invite me to be a grandfather, and it's like me and my friend that we belong to a similar meditation metaphysical group, and I said, well." He said, "Yeah, I'm selling." So I said, "You never sold anything in your life." He says, "You're right. I'm 50-something years old, but I don't feel like I just can call up people and just they want to buy from me." And he says, "It's like magic." Well, then there was a ding in the kitchen. The glass fell over. And so I said to him, "Oh my goodness, is this your friend?" My friend's name is Dave. Dave, are you helping George? And he said, "Ding, ding." And we started laughing because it was, there's that moment, where you're like, oh yeah, because David was the life of the party. So this was his joke. And so, they're funny. So things can be fun as well. Anyway,
Love it.
www.josephsmeditation.com and thelightwithin.com, and read some books and stuff. And then, if you have a favorite relative that you feel is very loving, that you want to have assistance from, they can definitely be there for
Yeah.
you. Okay.
Well, thank you as always, Joseph. It's always a dang good conversation with you. So thanks for sharing.
Okay.
Thanks
All
for
right.
joining you as well.
Send to your love and peace.
Thank you.